Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. We're back here today to preview Purdue's Citrus Bowl matchup against LSU. Purdue won 8 regular season games for the second straight year, and now they will get to take on an SEC opponent in the bowl game for the second straight year and for their third straight bowl appearance. Though the stories around the program have largely been off the field lately, here on the show today, we're going to preview the on-field action for the final time of this season as we prepare for the January 2nd kickoff. Real quick, if you don't already, be sure to follow the show on Twitter at BoilersBeyond. I'll be tweeting all throughout the Citrus Bowl with my thoughts, good, bad, ugly, whatever it may be for the Boilermakers. Be sure to follow along there and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back here after the game, maybe the day after, since Purdue's got a basketball game that night as well, but I'll have plenty of thoughts on the Citrus Bowl, so be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss that. Purdue versus LSU going to be on Monday, January 2nd, kind of the end of the holiday season when you go more by what day it is than what day of the week it is. 1 p.m. kickoff on ABC. Purdue gets a national TV audience for this one. You know, coming into this, it's been quite the roller coaster. It'll really cap off what's been a pretty crazy month for Purdue. You know, they to some degree back their way into the Big Ten championship game and give a pretty decent effort there. One to be proud of. And then everything changes that Monday. You know, Purdue found out it was in the Citrus Bowl on Sunday afternoon. And on Monday morning, Jeff Brom and Mike Babinski had their press conference, about an hour, 2 hours after it got announced that the Louisville job was open. And you could cut the tension with a butter knife in that room. Because you knew exactly what was coming. It shocked nobody that Jeff Brom left. It would have been naive to think that Jeff Brom wasn't going to leave. That immediately overshadowed any possible storyline about this bowl game. It led into a coaching search for Purdue, which led into the coordinator search and the filling out of a staff. National Signing Day has happened. Purdue has had a number of players enter the transfer portal. So, you know, so much of the conversation coming into this game has been about what's going on within the program and not at all about what's going to happen when Purdue plays LSU on January 2nd in Camping World Stadium. You know, clearly the biggest storyline in this is the number of Boilermakers who are not playing in this game. It's a growing trend across college football. Purdue is far from the only one who has experienced this. It was not surprising at all last year when George Karlaftis and David Bell became the first Purdue players, to my knowledge, to ever opt out of a bowl game. And, you know, that trend grew this year and certainly raised some eyebrows with Aiden O'Connell, Charlie Jones, Payne Durham, and Corey Trice all officially opting out of the bowl game to prepare for the NFL draft. No, none of these guys necessarily projects as an early draft pick. Corey Trice is probably your best shot there, I would think, just based off his athleticism and his size. But this is a group of guys who certainly are not guaranteed to be early draft picks and get big money. Nonetheless, they elected to opt out, focus their efforts on getting ready for pro days, for, you know, the combine style drills they'll be asked to do. So Purdue will be without, you know, clearly what are 4 of their top 8 players or so, at least, in those guys. Jalen Graham also will not be playing. Not sure exactly what that situation is, but he will not be playing in the bowl game. Tom Dienhart reported that a few days ago. I'm recording this here on the morning of Christmas Eve. I got holiday travels, so if there's some news before this gets posted, my apologies. Wanted to get this ready early so that it would be to you guys in plenty of time to listen to before the game. So, Purdue has 5 of its best players. You could make the argument those are its 5 best players not playing in the bowl game. Spencer Holstedge also announced that he was going to transfer and would transfer immediately. That leaves a really thin offensive line group. Holstedge is out the door, headed to UCLA. So, Purdue is already thin on the offensive line when Cam Craig got hurt early on in the season and had to retire from football, when Daniel Johnson suffered a season-ending injury. That put Purdue down to about 6 offensive linemen it was comfortable playing. Gus Hartwig got hurt against Northwestern, knee injury that cost him the rest of the season. So Josh Kaltenberger had to slide in at center, someone Purdue, probably wanted to let develop a little bit more, but he's in there, thrust into action, and now Spencer Holstedge leaves. So you have a really thin offensive line group. Purdue did have some guys, 3 guys on the defensive line who have entered the transfer portal but will still play in the Citrus Bowl. That being Branson Dean, Lawrence Johnson, and Jack Sullivan. Probably a good thing for Purdue. They need all the help they can get. And another storyline is the coaching staff. It raised some eyebrows when Purdue elected to name Brian Brom the interim head coach. And even Mike Babinski made note of that in his first press conference after Jeff Brom decided to take the Louisville job. He noted that it's a different decision. It's a little bit weird. It is. I don't know that it matters all that much. Ryan Walters has taken over. He's out on the recruiting trail. All of that's being taken care of. But it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. Mark Hagan is going to call the defense. Brian Brom is going to be the acting head coach. He's going to call the offense. Both of those guys are going to Louisville after the game to join Jeff Brom down there. That's a little different. That's not one I've seen much before. Now, it's rather rare that you have situations of a Power 5 school losing their coach to another job. That doesn't happen a ton, but going to be very interesting. There are a lot of assistant coaches gone immediately. Chris Barclay, Garrick McGee, Ryan Wallace, Ron English. Those guys are all out the door. So you're going to have some grad assistants thrust into positional coaching roles just to, really fill up the sidelines, fill up the staff for this game. The big name there, Drew Brees, coming back to be an assistant coach, whatever capacity that is. It's a good deal for Purdue. It's a good little PR thing. It's a good way to drum up a little bit of enthusiasm for a game that, quite frankly, doesn't have a ton of it. Probably done a little bit to try to get some fans to go down there. Early indications by the number of emails I've gotten about the different travel packages and about buying tickets. I'm going to guess they're not selling the way they did for Nashville last year. So getting Drew Brees in there is a good way to try to get fans excited about this. He is certainly the biggest name Purdue has in its program's history, and he's getting the people fired up. The social media stuff's been great. Ryan Walters is going to be in attendance, but he will not be coaching in any capacity, obviously. He said he won't be evaluating at all. He'll just be watching as a fan, rooting for Purdue. Clearly you don't want the new head coach out there in any bowl game. You don't want that first impression to be poor unless you're promoting from within, obviously. So he'll be there, but this will not be Ryan Walters' game. He hasn't coached the team at all. He'll just be there. Purdue's taking on an LSU team that went under a coaching change of their own ahead of this past season. Ed Orgeron got fired a couple years after winning a national championship and subsequently really kind of driving that program into the ground. brought in Brian Kelly, a hire that absolutely sent shockwaves around the college football world, getting the former Notre Dame head coach down there. A lot of the conversation was crazy. He gets down there and he's got his southern accent going and just a very interesting fit. Someone who'd been so Midwestern, Grand Valley State to Central Michigan to Cincinnati to Notre Dame, going down south. But so far, it's been fantastic. No one knew what to expect. LSU came into the regular season with a win total of 6.5, and they went 9-3 in the regular season and won the SEC West. They took down Alabama, something that no one really expected. They handled Ole Miss. They handled Mississippi State. They handled Auburn, all with ease. They lost in the SEC championship game to Georgia, a game that really wasn't all that close, but at 9-4, boy, this team did a much better job than expectations indicated. And if they make that extra point against Florida State in the opener, they may be a 10-win team. This is a pretty solid LSU group. They rank number 8 on 247 Sports in the team talent composite, something that, certainly reflects a good job that Ed Orgeron did of recruiting to LSU, one of the more effective recruiters in the history of college football is Ed Orgeron. So they have the talent there. They're dealing with opt-outs of their own. They have some big names, B.J. Ojulari, Mekhi Gardner, big names that are going to be opting out of this bowl game, but they have plenty of big names playing and plenty of strong athletes behind them to kind of fill in the gaps. They started a transfer quarterback this year. They kind of had a 3-way quarterback competition, 4-way quarterback competition, I guess, a little bit going into fall camp. Jaden Daniels won it, transfer from Arizona State, and he has been strong for them. He leads the team, obviously in passing, but also in rushing. He's pretty comfortably LSU's leading rusher on the season. Look, he's not going to air it out like crazy. He'll throw the ball plenty, but this is not an LSU offense that's just going to drop back and throw the ball. They're going to get him on the move. They're going to let him run, designed and not designed. He's a game manager of a passer. You look at his stats on the year, only a couple interceptions, but not, he's not throwing the ball a ton. They're more than content to run the ball, let him throw it a little bit, but they're not going to ask him to do too much through the air. He does have a couple of high-end receivers to throw to. Malik Neighbors and Kayshon Boutte are both really nice receivers. Purdue's going to be hard-pressed to cover them on the outside, especially without Corey Trice. Purdue's going to have to get creative in the back end, and if they're going to be playing as much man as they normally do, you're going to have to watch that deep ball. Purdue's safeties are going to have to be really good against those guys. LSU doesn't really have a singular running back that they rely on, but they've got 3 guys that they'll rotate in. Alongside Jaden Daniels, of course. They can do a lot of nice stuff in the zone read game, a lot of nice stuff in that shotgun running game that they like to use. They complement Jaden Daniels really well. And for a run-heavy offense that you see a lot of in the SEC, it works really well. They've got a solid defense. I wouldn't call it some elite defense, but they have some elite pieces. And the big name to watch for Purdue fans is going to be Harold Perkins, true freshman linebacker for LSU. He is an absolute monster. 11.5 tackles for loss on the season. 6.5 of those are sacks. He's crazy. He'd be an early draft pick if he was draft eligible now, and he's just a true freshman. The guy is really special. He's a really, really talented player. Someone who, 2 years from now, I guess that'll be the 2025 NFL draft he's eligible for. Going to be going early on, no doubt. He's a stud. He's got a couple of good inside linebackers with him, Micah Bakersville and Greg Penn, guys who will come downhill, they can make some stops. Again, losing guys like B.J. Ojolari on the interior of the defensive line, Mekhi Gardner at cornerback, none of that helps. But, at the end of the day, it's a good enough LSU defense. They've been good against the pass this year. That's something that, with Purdue's change at quarterback, doesn't mean as much necessarily, but it's a pretty good LSU defense. It's a pretty good LSU team overall. I normally don't throw this in, but I want to talk about what Purdue can do here in this game, because it's such a different approach than what Purdue's been able to take all year. Austin Burton's going to be the starting quarterback for this game. Michael Alemo is said to be in line for some snaps as well. This doesn't inspire much confidence. Purdue had to go with Austin Burton against Florida Atlantic when Aiden O'Connell was hurt with his rib injury. Purdue won that game by 2 points. They were outgained. They got a fortuitous fumble on a 4th down after Florida Atlantic had gotten the line to gain that sealed the deal. That game was at home. That was with Payne Durham. That was with Charlie Jones. That was with Corey Trice. Yeah, that game wasn't pretty. Austin Burton was fine. He completed most of his passes, 21 of 29, 3 touchdowns and a pick, but only had like 160-some yards. He's a short passer. There's not a whole lot of downfield ability there. And of course, not having Charlie Jones really doesn't help. I think you're very limited with what you're going to be able to do on offense with Austin Burton there. Of course, he brings a little bit of an element in the run game. I presume we'll see some zone read concepts for Purdue, trying to get him and Maccabee out in any type of space they can find. Maccabee's been fantastic this year. He's someone you want to lean on. Now, how much you can lean on him, I don't know. If you get off to a rough start and you get down in this game, you're going to have to throw the ball. But this is going to be a challenge for him. You're down 2 of your best offensive linemen, maybe your 2 best offensive linemen in Holstedge and Hartwig. Probably can't do a ton of substituting on the offensive line. So they're going to be trying to get holes open for him, and whether they can do so or not, we'll see. He's 80 yards away from 1,000 yards on the season. That would be absolutely awesome. Purdue hasn't had a 1,000-yard rusher in 14 years, going back to Corey Sheets in 2008. If Devin Maccabee could get there, that would be awesome. That'd be a major highlight to come from this bowl game. If Michael Alemo gets in there, I think it's fair to say I have no idea what to expect. We saw him for one series against Florida Atlantic, 3 and out, not really the fault of his own by any means, but that's all we saw there. We saw him against Indiana State in a blowout. He threw a couple deep balls. Great. We don't know, though. He's supposed to have a big arm, but we've not seen much of him in games. So this could be a nice opportunity to see what you have in him. Of course, everyone wants to see Brady Allen, the 4-star true freshman out of Southern Indiana. I'm a little torn on that one. And I'm in the same boat with Alemo here. Do you really want these guys' first legit game experience to come against a much better opponent and without your top 2 pass catchers, with a bit of a banged up or, dinged up patchwork offensive line a little bit? I don't know that that's really the way you want them to go in. I don't know that that's the first impression you want for these guys. I think that's a challenge here. We know Purdue's in the market for a transfer portal quarterback to add to the competition for next year, but for just these two, they're going to be competing for the job to some degree next year, and I don't think you want, just from a public perspective, the narrative around these guys to be, oh, well, they really struggled in that Citrus Bowl. It kills confidence. It gives them a bad vibe lingering into the 8 months until the season starts. I don't know. We'll see what they do there. We'll see how much Alamo plays. We'll see how the game script goes. If Purdue's in the game for a while and Austin Burton's playing well, I don't think you'll see much Michael Alamo. If LSU gets off to a big start, then who knows? Regardless, someone's going to have to step up for Purdue at receiver. Without Charlie Jones, this group was really, really disappointing this season. TJ Sheffield had his moments. He had a solid year. But past him, Mershawn Rice had a couple of good games. He was good against Michigan in the Big Ten championship game, but he'd been pretty much silent for about a month up until that point. Abdur-Rahman Yassin, not much going. Deion Burks, same deal. Andrew Sawinski's gotten on the field when most didn't really expect him to, but, maybe he can go make a play. Maybe all these guys can go make a play. Lord knows Purdue's going to need it. Paul Paferi will slide in as that number one tight end. Behind him, I think Drew Bibber will be the guy. So you're going to see Purdue go with a couple of pass-catching heavy tight ends, guys who are a lot less inline blockers and much more out pass catchers. Could be interesting to see there. And at receiver, maybe we can see some of the young guys. Maybe you can see a Colin Sullivan, who we really haven't seen since the bowl game last year. Maybe you can see a Preston Terrell. About Zion Steptoe. I know I'm probably forgetting somebody, but see what Purdue has in some of these younger guys who haven't played much. And then you look at the defensive side of the ball. It's a very nice win to get back those 3 defensive linemen who are going to be transferring. If for no other reason, it gives you guys who have started, guys who you can feel good about putting out there, because the back 7 is going to be really thin. No Jalen Graham-Hurts. I think he is your best defender. I think Corey Trice is by far your best player in the secondary. You're without those 2. So you're looking at Purdue having 5 guys they're comfortable playing in the secondary, really. At least from what we've seen this season. You'll have Reese Taylor and Jamari Brown outside. Bryce Hampton's going to slide into that, nickelback type of role. Cam Allen, Sanusi Kane back at safety. So, it's thin. O.C. Brothers, Kyron Douglas, Jacob Wahlberg, Samisi Fakasieki at linebacker, Ben Kryl maybe. Purdue's going to be thin. So you're excited to see if you can try to get some pressure on Jaden Daniels, I think. See what guys like Nick Carraway, Kadron Jenkins, Corday Sidnor, see what those guys can do. Because as a whole, Purdue's defense isn't a playmaking defense, so to speak, and they're going to have to make some plays to compete in this game. I look at the 3 keys for every game. I think a key for Purdue, just play loose. You have absolutely nothing to lose in this game. You're a 14-point underdog. You're here. You might as well go out there and play. Have fun. Go out there and see what you can do. I think they need to be incredibly aggressive on offense. Whatever that looks like, I don't know. I don't know that you can throw the ball downfield a ton with the personnel Purdue's going to have in there, both at quarterback, at receiver, and on the offensive line. But, come up with some trickeration. Find ways to just get the ball into space. You need to find points in weird places for number 3, and that's defense and special teams. It doesn't have to directly, lead to a point. It doesn't have to be a pick 6 or a kick return for a touchdown. But find ways to set up your offense for easy points. You have to really just find a way to compete in this game. Find a way to make things happen. If you do that, anything can happen. I'll get my prediction momentarily, but, a lot of the narrative here as we enter, and as I record this, I think we're 14 or 15 bowl games in already. bowl games aren't what they used to be. Everyone can see that, and I know it's a convenient thing to say as I talk about a bowl game where Purdue's going to be a 2-touchdown underdog. But, you've got players opting out. You have really poor attendance at these games. I watched Missouri against Wake Forest last night down in Tampa, and there was absolutely nobody there. That's unfortunately kind of the reality of these now. I think the main benefit as you look at the program has always been the extra 15 practices you get as being a bowl team. It's a nice reward to the players for a season. For the fans who like to travel, you get to go somewhere different. And this year for Purdue, you get to go to Orlando. I'm sitting here as the wind chill's like -20 in Indiana, so fans will be happy to get down to Orlando to watch this. The players usually get some little gifts from the bowls, sometimes a video game console, headphones, gift cards, all that stuff. That's good for them. Winning or losing a bowl game generally has very little impact on what's to come the following season, especially now in the transfer portal era where your roster is going to look way different from this year to next. You look at all Purdue will lose off this roster. You look at what Ryan Walters is going to want to bring in. I don't think this is an indicator at all of what's going to be happening moving forward. It can fire up the fans. You look at last year's win against Tennessee for Purdue. It got people fired up. Absolutely it did. And people talked about it for a day or so. And then the playoff came around and kind of buried the narrative. So it can get people fired up. Purdue fans had fun in Nashville. You don't want to get blown out. You don't want to be that story, the way Purdue was in 2018 against Auburn. The positive here is that this is not a postseason sport. The beauty of college football is what happens in the regular season. The beauty of college football are those October Saturdays in West Lafayette when the leaves are turning, it's crisp, 50-some degrees, it's beautiful out. That's the beauty of college football. The beauty of college football isn't the postseason. It never has been, and hopefully it never will be. These bowl games are not the identity of the sport. They're simply entertainment. They're simply TV inventory for ESPN, if we really want to call it what it is. The negative of these bowl games is that, as these get devalued, man, there are probably a lot of Purdue fans that bought their tickets, got their hotels, got their airfare, all purchased before Jeff Brom left. And then before 4 or 5 of its best players came out that they're not going to play in the bowl game. That's a bummer. Now, there's not really much you can do to change that. You can't blame Jeff Brom for leaving. You can't blame the players for opting out, really, if that's the advice they're getting, if that's what they feel is the best decision. So it is a bummer. I don't know how well this will be attended. I don't think it's going to be a great Purdue crowd. I don't know how well LSU is going to travel to this. I have no idea. But what I do know is that Purdue played in the same bowl back in, I guess it was New Year's Day of 2004. And while it's a different name now, it was the Capital One Bowl then, it's the Citrus Bowl now, the importance of that game is night and day compared to what it was back in 2004. It's just not the same. It's not the same for anybody at all. I think LSU is going to cruise in this one. I'm going to go 42-24. I just don't, you don't like to look at bowl game motivation all the time because it's really hard to predict. But there's been a lot going on this past month for Purdue. It's without its leaders. It's without its best players. It's without its head coach. And you have a situation now where, players are looking at what's to come. Players are worried about what's to come with a new coach, with a new coaching staff. players aren't as much worried about what they're going to do in their final game with Brian Braun. I think it, provides Purdue an opportunity to get some young guys on the field. I think it provides an opportunity to go out there and let it rip one last time. But ultimately, I think this was going to be a tough matchup for Purdue before the opt-outs. Even if Aiden O'Connell, Charlie Jones, Payne Durham, all of them played, I don't think this is as good of a Purdue team as what it took to Nashville last year. And I think now with these opt-outs, this is a seriously deteriorated Purdue team that's going to be playing against an LSU team looking to make it a 10-win season, looking to really carry some big momentum into the non-playing portion of the season and generate some hype coming into year 2 for Brian Kelly. So I think it's going to be rough for Purdue. I think, this is one of those times where, you wish you could have been in the Music City Bowl or something. It's like last year you wish you could have been in that bigger bowl. This year, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to watch. It's going to be interesting to see how Purdue comes out. You're going to know very quick how much Purdue wants to be at that game. We'll see what happens there. Got a couple of good questions. I got snowed in a little bit, so set out for some questions from you all. And this was a good one. Someone wanted to know how many starters from the Week 1 game against Penn State will be starting in the bowl game. The answer to that is 11. If you just count the 22, if you count the punter and kicker, Mitchell Finner and Jack Ansel are still there. But in the 22 offense and defensive starters, it's going to be 11. On offense, there are only 3 guys who started the season opener who are going to be starting in the bowl game. That's TJ Sheffield, Marcus Bowe, and Eric Miller. Who won't be starting? Aiden O'Connell, opting out. King Doru, don't really know what's going on there, but we haven't seen him in forever. Charlie Jones, opted out. Brock Thompson actually started that opener. Didn't do much there, and then we didn't see him again after the first series of the Indiana State game. Payne Durham, opt out. Cam Craig, injured, had to retire from football. Spencer Holstead, transfer, and Gus Hartwig, injury. So 8 of Purdue's 11 starters on offense from the Penn State game are not going to be playing in the Citrus Bowl. On defense, it is eight guys still playing who started that season opener. The entire defensive front, Jack Sullivan, Branson Dean, Lawrence Johnson, Kadron Jenkins, those 4 are going to be starting in the bowl game. Kyron Douglas, O.C. Brothers, started at linebacker. They're still going to start. Reese Taylor and Cam Allen in the secondary. So you're missing Jalen Graham and Corey Trice, in addition to Chris Jefferson, who left the team after the Maryland game, I believe. 11 guys who started Week 1 will be starting in the bowl game. And I think another fun way to look at it, and we'll know once the bowl game starts and we know who is starting for Purdue, but how many of those bowl game starters are going to start against Fresno State in Week 1 of 2023? A lot of these guys are going to be graduating. 3 of them, at least, will be transferring. Going to be interesting to see there. That number being over under 11 for guys who are going to start next year, that's going to be interesting to see. That's going to be really, really close, I think. Do you think Purdue will play 14 games in a season again in the next 15 years? Purdue has played 14 games in a season just twice, 2006 and 2022. 06 was that year when the Big Ten's old rules had it where you got to play 13 regular season games if you did the Hawaii deal. That was the year Purdue did it. So they played 13 regular season games and then lost in the Champs Sports Bowl. This year, and the way it goes now, is if you make the conference championship game and a bowl game, that'll get you to 14. I think it's a little difficult to envision Purdue getting to the Big Ten championship game once USC and UCLA join. a 16-team Big Ten where just the top 2 teams go to the conference title game. Uphill battle. Now, I don't know what things are going to look like in 10 to 12 years, but right now, tough to envision. I don't think Purdue's going to win the West next year. Assuming the playoff stays at 12, meaning, if it's an expanded playoff, if they make it March Madness, who knows? But I'm going to say probably not. I think Purdue will probably play a lot of 13-game seasons. 14, though, conference championship game. We'll see. I'm not leaning that way, but, it's hard to look out more than a couple years in advance at what college football looks like now, let alone 15. And then finally, how much weight do you put in the results of this game? What would a blowout loss do for the optics of the program, especially during the coaching change? Yeah, I don't put anything in this. I really don't. I think you want to avoid a blowout. I don't think, a situation like 2018 Auburn isn't good for anybody. Purdue was down, it was like 49-7 at halftime. It's like 42-0 after the first quarter. It was such a blowout that it's embarrassing. You don't want that to happen. It doesn't mean much, but it's just a bad look. I think, as I said, Purdue is going to have an uphill battle here with all of their players. Now it's climbing Everest a little bit. It's a lot to ask. I think this, as I said, this is exactly why you don't have the new coach involved in the bowl game at all. You don't want this to be your first impression of them. You don't want them to have to take this over and go throw something on the field in a couple weeks. This is why Ryan Walters is going to be there as a fan. With the roster turnover, with the transfer portal, it means even less in terms of the new coach. But yeah, I don't put much stake into this. I think it's a good opportunity to watch Purdue play one last time, see what you can see in some players who will be back next year. But if I'm a Purdue fan here, I'm not putting a whole lot of stake in what happens here, and I'm not really letting this alter my mood about 2023 and beyond. This game shouldn't change much there. I wanted to wish you all a happy new year. This will be the last episode of 2022. Thank you all for listening. Whether this is your first episode or if you've been around all year, thank you guys so much. It's certainly been a year to remember. It's been a crazy one. I remember, the first episode talking about the Music City Bowl win and talking about, what could happen for Purdue in the upcoming season. And now, even though it was not as pretty as I thought it would be, they still went 8-4. They're in a January 1st bowl game. You look at basketball, the disappointment of March, of losing to St. Peter's, but the excitement that has come so far this season. There's been a lot of fun stuff to talk about this past year, and there's a lot to look forward to into 2023. Basketball is going to be fascinating as they get into the 18-game grind of the Big Ten that lies ahead, starting on January 2nd against Rutgers. We'll have tons of transfer portal and recruiting action. What can Ryan Walters add here before spring ball? And then what can he add in the portal after spring ball to come over the summer? The summer will be big time for Ryan Walters' first real Purdue recruiting class. What does he do there? After that's all over, we get the first look into the Purdue program on the field under Ryan Walters. It's going to be fun to follow. I can't wait for it. I can't wait to continue talking with you all in the new year. As I said earlier, I'll be back here after the bowl game. Maybe January 3rd, maybe January 4th, that podcast will post. I'm not sure yet. But we'll have a full reaction to that. Talk plenty of basketball. Be sure to follow on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. Lots of stuff there. Come join the conversation. And subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Still so much to talk about, even though the playing portion of the football season will be over. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. Have a safe new year. Safe travels to all of you heading to Florida to watch Purdue versus LSU. I will talk to you next year.